My name's Hannah Johnston. I'm in Dr. Hernandez's Death and Dying class at Texas A&M, and this is the assignment for CRB6. I haven't done a video before, so just covering all my bases there. So the piece of media I chose for this assignment was 13 Reasons Why. I felt like that was probably the Reasons Why on Netflix is a show about. So to interject some positionality, I think it was really positive of death in the U.S. and within the ages that I think that we learned in class that suicide is most prominent in. I think it was really important because I think this is also the audience. So I think the people who made this show, so she becomes like more of an outcast. That I've seen, it doesn't really look like she ever gets plugged back in. So now some things I think that could be in places that could be improved upon. I personally felt like you do find out the exact way that Hannah Baker commits suicide, and she's the one who recorded the tapes. So that goes against analyses that I've read online. Nowhere in the seasons is it ever mentioned that Hannah is struggling with some kind of mental illness, whether it be anxiety, depression, bipolar. Nobody knows. It's just she killed herself. Also in the way that Hannah Baker's tapes are taped, like she wants people to do exactly as she says, act accordingly, don't speak about the tape. It was very weird in that way, so overall I definitely think there was a romanticization. So I'm going to analyze this more on a broad scale, but the biggest thing I found when it comes to places that could be improved upon, the whole premise of the show romanticizes suicide. Because we see, if you're someone who may be disconnected from obviously the whole premise of the show is the note, which is the tapes, so sharing the content of the note, that violates that. I feel like this show does that as well, which does that. Sensationalizing, absolutely. Glamorizing, absolutely. I think that this show does that, so there's a lot of things that could be improved upon, but I think the biggest thing, I also remember when this show came out that I believe there were reports that there was an uptick in teen suicide, and then go from there. The second. When it comes to two concrete examples of ways that I think the show could be improved, the first is actually mentioning that mental illness played a part in Hannah's actions, because nowhere in at least the first 3 or 4 episodes that I watched and reports and analyses, when it comes to two concrete examples of ways that I think the show could be improved, the first is actually mentioning that mental illness played a part in Hannah's actions, because at least the first 3 or 4 episodes that I watched and reports and analyses that I've read online, nowhere in the seasons is it ever mentioned. She never even got to see the impact that her actions had on people. Like, that's the whole point of killing herself. So I think just not having the show at all, honestly, would be a great way to not glorify that. So another concrete way, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of the show if you were to actually take action on it, but it's to not glorify suicide. Because in the tapes, it's clear that Hannah wanted people to be impacted by her death, or she wouldn't have left the tapes, and she wouldn't have asked that people listen to them, and then have them passed around to the people who she believes impacted her. So the glorification of the suicide, she never even got to see they're finished. The season follows one of those mentioned in the tapes, Clay. So to answer the case study part of this, I wanted my summary to be, just so I could have it straight. So the show 13 Reasons Why on Netflix is a show about American teens for young adults. 13 Reasons Why is a young adult story about a high school student named Hannah Baker who dies by suicide and leaves behind a series of cassette tapes explaining. These tapes are then passed around per her request within the tapes to the people mentioned within them. All 13 people are expected to listen to all 13 tapes. So to answer the case study part of this, so to interject some positionality about teens for young adults, well, as a young adult myself, I believe that this audience is not far in high school to have those guards up that maybe millennials will. And as a young adult myself, and relate to being in high school and having a classmate commit suicide, seeing the ripple effects of that. No note was left, so that also played a part in, like, essentially suicide prevention and awareness. Powerful that the actors did that, say, my name is so-and-so, and you shouldn't do this. They also said their character, because I think a lot of people forget that these are real people playing these roles, and from what I remember when this show first came out. So, what do I think was done well? I think it was really positive that at the very beginning of season 1, episode 1, they did, like, the actors stated who they were as humans and then who the characters that they played were. 5-minute sequence of just them doing that and then basically saying suicide is not the answer, and then providing resources specifically from the show. I think it was like 13 Reasons Why .org or so about the perceived burden. That I feel like that may come in later, but she's very clearly also not afraid to. We also learned on November 5th in class that women in friendships, like women having emotional support and having that face-to-face connection, can be. Personally felt like the whole show, the whole premise of the show, romanticizes suicide. Because we see, if you're someone, in this case high school, you may want to be remembered for something, or you may want to kind of stick it to the man. And I felt like that's kind of a hardship. I feel like this show does that as well, which sensationalizing, absolutely. Glamorizing, absolutely. I'd be improved upon. But I think the biggest thing, I also remember when this show came out that there was an uptick in teen suicide done in a similar way to this, that this show depicts. And when it comes to violating established media guidelines, I currently have up the reporting on suicide.org. I did some Googling in Hannah's actions, because nowhere in at least the first 3 or 4 episodes that I watched, they had no idea what was going on in their childhood. So now, in regards to some of the public's takes, I'll put them behind me. One of them was, someone was like, I don't understand how the parents are acting like they didn't know what was going on, because the parents in 13 Reasons Why, the mom and the dad, they're because it's like she's playing the blame game, and she's just being a little puppet master post-mortem. And to tie both of those together into supporting my argument, I feel like those both support the idea that suicide is a symptom of a larger issue. It's never the issue, if that makes sense.